Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors, a podcast that keeps HR pros, business leaders, and operations teams ahead of the curve. We're sponsored by our friends at WorkHuman. My name is Steve Boese. Today we are looking into a growing and contentious trend in corporate governance, the rise of anti-DE&I shareholder proposals. We'll look at what those proposals are, who's behind them, whether or not they're succeeding, and what they could mean for the future of corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially under the current Trump administration. To understand this trend, we first need to talk about how shareholder proposals work. In the U.S., shareholders who own a certain amount of stock in a company for at least a year are allowed to submit proposals to be included in the company's annual proxy statement. These proposals, known as proxy proposals, are then voted on by all shareholders. While most proposals don't pass, they can be a powerful way to influence corporate behavior, draw attention to issues, and signal investor sentiment. Historically, many shareholder proposals have focused on increasing corporate transparency, improving governance, or pushing for stronger environmental or social policies. In recent years, though, we've seen a surge in proposals supporting DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly following the racial justice movements of 2020. But more recently, there's been a sharp rise in anti-DE&I proposals. According to a study published in April 2025 by the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance, these anti-DE&I proposals are now 40% of all DE&I related filings, and that's up from just 6% in 2022. That's a massive spike in just a few years. The authors describe this as a fundamental shift in the proxy landscape, with a wave of proposals that challenge or seek to roll back corporate DE&I efforts. Despite their growing prevalence, these proposals rarely gain traction with investors. On average, anti-DE&I proposals receive just 1% to 3% support from shareholders. None have come close to receiving a majority. For instance, in Apple's 2025 proxy statement, a proposal requesting that the company eliminate DE&I programs received only about 2.3% of shareholder votes. That means nearly 98% of Apple's shareholders rejected the idea outright. And it's a pattern that's repeated across companies. Costco, JP Chase, Pfizer. These proposals keep appearing, but they don't pass. So if they're not succeeding, why are they being filed at all? Well, the answer lies in the motives behind them. These proposals are often backed by a small but vocal group of conservative organizations, most notably the National Center for Public Policy Research and the National Legal and Policy Center. In fact, these two groups were behind over 60% of anti-DE&I proposals submitted over the last 3 years. Their goal isn't necessarily to win votes, it's to reframe the conversation. By submitting these proposals, they aim to challenge the legitimacy of DE&I as a business priority and mark it as a legal or financial risk. Many of these proposals mimic the format and language of traditional ESG or civil rights filings. But instead of advocating for inclusion, they raise the specter of reverse discrimination or potential violations of civil rights laws. And their sponsors often claim that DE&I programs may harm shareholder value, create reputational risk, or lead to legal liability. And this strategy has gained momentum in the broader political climate. Since the Supreme Court's 2023 decision banning affirmative action in higher education admissions decisions, there's been a push to apply similar scrutiny to corporate DE&I programs. And earlier this year, President Trump issued an executive order directing federal agencies to investigate and discourage DE&I-related initiatives across both the public and private sectors. As a result, many companies are finding themselves caught in a tricky spot, facing political and legal pressure on one side and investor and employee expectations on the other. Some companies have responded by rebranding their DE&I efforts. JP Morgan, for example, has relabeled its DE&I initiatives as workforce composition. Others, like Microsoft, have softened their public language around DE&I while continuing to support internal programs. At the same time, some companies are choosing to stand firm. Apple and Costco, for example, have publicly rejected anti-DE&I proposals and have reaffirmed their commitment to inclusion. And despite the political noise, the overwhelming majority of shareholders continue to support companies with strong DE&I strategies. Looking ahead to the next 3.5 years under the Trump administration, it's likely that legal and regulatory pressures on corporate DE&I will continue to intensify. We'll probably see even more anti-DE&I shareholder proposals, more lawsuits challenging hiring and recruiting practices, and more government scrutiny of internal corporate diversity programs. So where does that leave corporate America? While companies may adapt the language, public framing, or presentation of their DE&I work, most will likely continue with the core elements of these efforts, especially around data reporting, inclusive hiring practices, and board of directors diversity. DE&I is now deeply embedded in corporate strategy, investor reporting, and brand identities. It's probably not going away, but how it's framed and defended is evolving. In sum, while anti-DE&I shareholder proposals may be on the rise, they're not finding much success at the corporate ballot box. And as the political landscape shifts, companies will need to carefully balance compliance, culture, and their commitments to equity and inclusion. That's all for today's Workplace Minute. Want more on the future of work, talent, and tech? Be sure to hit follow or subscribe and share this episode with a colleague who cares about getting the workplace right. And we will continue to follow this and all the important topics and trends in the world of work here on the HR Happy Hour Media Network. This has been Steve Boese for the Workplace Minute, powered by H3 HR Advisors.